Asurim. The next bracha is Okef Kfufim, down at the bottom of page number 18. What does Okef Kfufim mean? Right? Who straightens the bent. What does that mean? Again, somebody who's bent over is somebody who's carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders, right? Somebody who doesn't have that sense of mission, right? So if you are Matir Asurim, if you can break away the chains that are tying you down over here, then of course you can stand up straight, right?
I always read that differently. Like the bent are like people that are just not on. Like they're just off somehow. Like strange people.
Oh no, I don't. I mean, the emphasis. I don't think so. I think over here
broken people, like like traumatized people.
Certainly are included inside of this, but I think it's more general actually. Which means lots of people who look perfectly okay, right, and behave perfectly okay, but they really are kind of bent over with the weight of the world, and they really are, overwhelmed. I think maybe that's the best way to describe it. We all of us get like that at some point or another. That's for sure.
So it's bent under the weight of
Yeah, Matir Asurim, which means who releases a bound. There's a person living here in Israel called Natan Sharansky. Now, Natan Sharansky, he's the head of the Jewish Agency actually, but Natan Sharansky is a former refusenik. Back in the 70s and the 80s, they wouldn't let the Jews leave the USSR, and people that tried to get visas to be able to leave, very often they were imprisoned. They were persecuted. They lost their jobs. Then they were accused of being parasites. I mean, it was like it was a whole thing. Natan Sharansky in those days was called Anatoly Sharansky, and he and a few of his friends tried to do something which was pretty silly actually, and they tried to hijack a plane in order to get themselves flown. Now but the Russian authorities were aware of the plan, and they arrested them. And Natan Sharansky spent a lot of time in Russian prisons. He actually spent, if my memory serves me correct, 9 months in solitary confinement in Siberia. As part of his punishment. He was finally released back in 1986, maybe 1987, something like that. He was released when a lot of pressure was put to bear by the Americans, and they finally let him go. And he came here to Israel. I remember when he came, thousands and thousands of people went down to the airport to meet him and to greet him. He's a brilliant man. He's a very humble man. He's a very modest man. He lives a half a block away from Reb Moshe, which would explain why he's so humble and modest.
No, but very, very nice. You're right.
Yeah, he's a very, 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 very special man. I remember reading something that he wrote when he was writing about his experiences of being in solitary confinement in Siberia, and he wrote that there are. He says that the Russians can take away, the Russian authorities, they can take away everything except for my freedom. An astonishing thing to say, right? Something that he's describing his experiences whilst he's in solitary confinement in Siberia. He's saying that they can take everything away except for his freedom, because freedom really is a state of mind. The physical state of being is very secondary. The essence of freedom is a person needs to feel free. And there are a lot of people who are physically free who are not free. They don't have that sense of freedom. They don't have that sense of knowing that they have something that they should be doing over here in this world. And there are people who are imprisoned who truly are free. And it's I think that's really the most incredible idea over here. It's interesting. The Maharal says, the great Maharal from Prague, who lived about 400 years ago, he says that the most difficult dimension of taking the Jews out of Egypt was to take away their state of mind, that state of being slaves, right? The generations worth of being slaves. The people that were coming out of Egypt, that many of them, they were born into slavery. Their parents were born into slavery as well. They didn't know anything else. And says the Maharal that the most difficult dimension of all, as far as God was concerned, was to take away that feeling of being, this is what we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be slaves to Paro. That's our state of mind. When I was growing up, there was a study was done and a book was written called Roots, which researched the non-white, the African American population in America. And they were trying to find out why it was. The African Americans were much more involved in crime, and the areas that they lived in were perhaps not quite as not quite as welcoming as other areas. And they were trying to work out why it was. Where did that come from? And one of the things that was the whole premise of the book Roots. But one of the things that they realized was that these people had no roots. They've been uprooted from their their places in Africa, their true homes in Africa. They've been taken as slaves across to America, and then generations of people are just slaves. That's all they are. That's our identity. And when slavery is finally taken away, interesting enough, a lot of them had a lot of trouble adapting and adjusting, because the only thing they knew was slavery and the lifestyle of a slave. And what they felt, and the book, I can't remember. Do you remember who wrote it? I can't remember who wrote the book.
Haley. Oh, I know they made a whole TV program of that. Haley, H-A-L-E.
Haley something. No, that was his first name.
No, the second.
Second name. I don't remember. But the fascinating thing was that because these people were lacking roots, because they were lacking, something which takes them back further than their immediate existence, they were behaving in a way that it was difficult for them to integrate into American society. And I think it's very true. It's very true, as far as we Jews are concerned as well. It's very true, right? And that's the difficulty of taking us out of Egypt, is taking us out of the mindset of being Jews. And that's the idea of Matir Asurim. Once we remove the mental chains that are tying us down, it's okay for film. Then we can stand upright, and we can, people that stand upright are people that have a sense of purpose. Right? You ever seen soldiers, standing to attention? Even if they're just standing outside guarding nothing, which is what they do very often in England. Nevertheless, it's a sense of purpose. You know what you're supposed to do. You know what you're there for. The next bracha on page number 20 is a bracha which is really, at face value, very, very strange for two reasons. First of all, it doesn't seem to have any connection whatsoever to anything that we've done up until now. And secondly, it's not accurate. Well, what are you giggling about? Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, roka haaretz al hamayim. That God spreads out the earth upon the waters. So, again, what have we done up until now? Up until now, we have worked out the difference between good and bad. We've become Jewish. We've become free. We've got mitzvahs to keep. We open our eyes to be able to do those mitzvahs. We clothe ourselves in the mitzvahs. We break away from the physical things that are stopping us from becoming who we need to become. And now we can stand up straight because we've got a sense of purpose. Everything is great, right? And then all of a sudden, that God spreads out the earth upon the waters. So what's it doing here? What's the idea? So first of all, we need to know that this bracha is really an incredibly important bracha because it's changing directions. Up until now, the brachas that we've recited are going to turn us into good Jews, right? To do what we're supposed to do. From now on, the brachas are going to turn us into believing Jews, which is a little bit more complicated. Rokaret al hamayim. God spreads out the earth upon the waters. Is that true? No, it's not true.
Like the ultimate continent that split up.
But even then, if you know the way that the world is built, the oceans, it's like a huge bath, like a huge bathtub. You've got landmass on each side, right? And then going down, you've got the basin, and the water is sitting inside, which means that if anything, it's not that God spreads the land out on the water, but rather God pours the water into the land. And yet the bracha says the other way around. And like I said,
I don't know anything about science, but didn't the whole Earth used to be covered in water?
No,
never.
It used to be a bunch of molten lava and rock, and then the introduction of water is what hardened everything. So the earth, like the land part of the earth, while in a liquid form, was still there before the water.
So,
How did the water?
moral of the story is, if you don't want to harden yourself, don't take a shower. I guess that's what it comes down to, right? Here, what's Pshat? Says the Vilna Gaon. We're going back 250 years now. The most astonishing idea, again, everybody here knows, even if you don't know any science, right? You know a little bit about the way that the world is built. The world is built with strata, which means there are layers upon layers upon layers upon layers. And the strata, of course, are very, very revealing as you go down. All kinds of things can be learnt from them, and all kinds of very fascinating, details about the makeup of the world is going to be revealed. At the core of the earth is a molten mass. Says the Vilna Gaon that when the bracha says "Rokaret al hamayim," that God spreads the earth out onto the water, he says mayim doesn't mean water. He says mayim means liquid. And the Vilna Gaon says that the world sits on a liquid center. Again, we're going back 250 years. These are things that were not known until much later on, right? And says the Vilna Gaon that normally when you take something heavy and you put it into liquid, what happens? It tends to sink, right? That's the nature of heavy things being displacing the water and working their ways downwards. Says the Vilna Gaon, the fact that the world exists, what?
It's a matter of density, not weight.
Okay, however you want to. Good, you're right. I mean, because you can have enormous heavy boats, right, that go through the water without too much trouble, and small little things that don't weigh very much will sink. It's got to do with density. It's got to do with weight distribution. It's got to do with all kinds of things. I presumably would float reasonably well on the water because my density and weight distribution is very impressive. And that's without eating all those biscuits. Huh? How about that? It's not fair. Says the Vilna Gaon, the world exists because God commands it to exist. Every moment of the day, we exist because God wills us to exist. Which means that Rokaret al hamayim is coming to teach us that the earth exists through the desire of God, not through anything else. Which means that what are we doing now? Like I said before, we're changing tack. We're not concentrating now on the brachas of what to be a good Jew. Now we're going to change tack to become believing Jews, which has got a whole different dimension to it, and that explains the next bracha. The next bracha is really the most extraordinary bracha.
So just to clarify, the bracha about the earth upon the water is just concerning faith in God.
He's telling us like this, that the world exists because God wills for the world to exist, right? Which means that's the beginning of our recognizing what our relationship with God really needs to be, right? We'll see. The next bracha coming up is, in my opinion, is an extraordinary bracha which can only come after Rokaret al hamayim, right after this bracha. Right? What do we say? Shasali kol tzorki, that God gave me everything that I need. Which means the inference is like this. Speaking theologically, God keeps the world in existence every moment of the day. If God keeps the world in existence every moment of the day, that means that God keeps you in existence as well for every moment that you're alive, right? What does that mean? It means that God needs you here in this world. God wants you here in this world. Anybody here have a birthday coming up soon? Yeah, when? April. Okay. Good. Even closer. December. Look at that. Rabbi Nachman Mibresta said a very beautiful thing once. That what's the importance of a birthday? That it's a day that you acknowledge the fact that God needs you here in this world. Don't ask me why. I don't have a clue. I'm just telling you what Rabbi Nachman says.
No,
That's
it's
all.
nice. I just,
If you didn't need to be here, huh?
I wish I felt that way. That I needed.
So how long have you been feeling like this? You two should speak to each other. Yeah, you know what? I think it's a difficult thing it's a difficult concept to latch onto and to internalize. I think because what are we saying? We're saying like this that I am an integral part of the world that God has created, and if I'm here, it means that God wants me to be here right now. And sometimes it's hard to hold on to that kind of an idea, right? It's not such an easy thing to have. Since when have you two been buddies?
I don't know.
So, what's the pshat? Shasari Kotoki, God gives me everything that I need for right now to exist, right now. Right? You could look a little bit happier about it if that's what we're learning is true. Then you need to be here right now listening to me. And you've got to be happy about that because that means you've got everything that you need right now.
If we're so necessary, why is it so hard to figure out what our mission is and what we're needed for? Why is it so difficult?
You know what? It's interesting. I sometimes I think like this. This preoccupation with trying to work out what we're needed for, right? I don't know what does that mean exactly. God wants us here in this world in order for us to do His will and to bring a little bit more of God's majesty down here into the world. That bit, that's easy enough to deal with, right? How does God want me to do that? So obviously, if we're Jewish, God wants us to do that through the mitzvahs and through learning His Torah and becoming better people. Beyond that, I'm going. Bless you. I'm going to go out on a. I'm going to say something pretty radical, right? Does God care, in inverted commas, whether, for example, you become a doctor, or is it that you are going to fulfill your mission by being a doctor rather than being an accountant, or rather than being a plumber or being a garbage collector? I don't think that's what it means. I really don't. I really don't think that's what it means. Unless you have the potential to become a spiritual leader of enormous impact on the Jewish world, I really don't think that it makes. I really don't think that God's like looking at you and saying, "Oh, you idiot! You went and signed up for social work, right? When I wanted you to go into occupational therapy, you fool, right?" I don't think that's what it's coming down to. I really don't. Which means that we have to succeed in whatever we choose to do. We need to succeed in the best way that we can. And we need to succeed in a way which is going to reflect the fact that we're Jewish. Right? So that really means, in theory, that you could go into any field and you don't have to be concerned that, maybe God didn't really want me to do this. Maybe He wanted me to do something else. And to be forever second-guessing yourself, right?
But do you really mean any field, though?
Yeah, like you can't be a pimp or anything like that.
Oh, okay. Come on.
Why do you have to limit yourself?
He did, and that's the best he can do. No, for sure not. Obviously, it's got to be within things which are acceptable.
It's actually tough to find a job that allows you to really live the Torah properly.
Yeah.
It's actually not that easy to do.
Yeah, I think so. And maybe here, so maybe that's the mission of each person, no? That regardless of what they go into, to be able to do that, even though it's hard. I know that it's hard. For sure, I know that it's hard.
God assigned that to you, whether you like it or not.
Good. So now here, that's Shasari Kotsaki. So now you've got to do the best with what you've got, right? That's what That's what I feel. That's really what I think. I've told this over in the past, but I'll tell it over again because it's something which is, to me, it's a very clear kind of an idea. There was a person learning over. He took off 6 months years ago, and he was an advertising executive. And in the world of, he said the world of advertising is crazy. He's completely crazy. I don't know what it's like today, but in his day, It was like a bunch of, very, very sort of creative, innovative people sitting around, shouting out ideas to each other. And he said that work began at around 12 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock in the late morning, beginning of the afternoon. He said, but they would work until who knows when. They could work until 11, 12 o'clock at night. You keep working until your creative juices would run out. And he said as he became more religious, he never had a problem with davening shacharit, because obviously, if you're starting work at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, so you can find a point at some point in the morning to get up and to daven. And he said he never had a problem with davening Ma'ariv either, because just whenever he came home, he would daven, whatever time it was. He said, but mincha was always a problem. So, you're in the middle. It wasn't a Jewish office that he was working in, and he said you're always involved in something. You're always busy in something. You can't sort of get up and say, "Excuse me, I gotta go and pray," right? So he said mincha. He didn't pray mincha at all very often, and he said he was okay with that. For the beginning, he was okay because he was davening shachris, he was davening Ma'ariv. He thought he was doing great, but at some point, it started to, just to niggle at him a little bit. And he said that one day, he said they were pitching for the largest account they'd ever pitched for. It was millions of dollars worth of advertising. And they're sitting in this boardroom. He says they've been in there since the beginning of their workday, and it's hours and hours, and they're threshing this out with this other company that they're trying to get this account. And he said and it's like they're just there, and they're there, and they're there, and it's like, and he said he had this feeling he had to go to the bathroom. So he pushed it off, right? Because this is a really important meeting. And then at some point, he said he got to the point where it wasn't a case of whether he was going to go to the bathroom or not. It was just simply a case of where he was going to go. Either he was going to have to get up and leave the boardroom and go to the bathroom, or he was going to do it there in the boardroom. But that's what he'd reached. Personally, I thought if he would have done it there in the boardroom, they probably would have thought, "Wow, that is incredibly creative." You know what? Wow, that's got to be our advertising pitch for sure, for sure. But so what did he do?
It's
he
not
said,
a matter of when you're going to buy our product. It's a matter of where. You should be in marketing.
"Oh gosh, yeah, the mind boggles. Imagine what you would be eating and drinking." Huh?
So what was the outcome?
So what happened? He's like, it's mamish, it's make or break, right? So he says to them, "Please excuse me for a few minutes," and he got himself up out of there, and he went running out as fast as he could, and he went to the bathroom. And he said that he's doing his business in the bathroom, right? And he had an epiphany. He said he suddenly realized nobody blinked an eye. You got to get up and leave the boardroom. Nobody questioned why.
So
He said, which was up until then, he'd been imagining that he's got to tell these people, excuse me, but I just have to go and pray the afternoon service. So I'm going to go stand in the corner over here, and I'm going to sway backwards and forwards. I'm okay, really. I'm just going to sway backwards and forwards a little bit. And then after I've taken 3 steps back, I'm going to sit down, and I'm going to put my head down on my arm like this, and I'm going to look really sad. But I'm okay, really I'm okay. Fine, right? He realized that, I don't have to tell you what I'm doing. So he told me that he never missed another mincha after that. Didn't matter. He said he got to the time in the afternoon. That's it. He's got to go and pray. So he would just say, "Excuse me, please," and he would walk out of wherever he was, find himself a quiet little place in the office somewhere, and for 10 minutes he would pray, and then come back 5 minutes, whatever it takes. Well, what's the worst thing people are going to think about him? Maybe he's got a prostate problem. I don't know. It's like he's always running off to the bathroom. This guy. It's like, it's an Indian. It really is. Rabbi Wein. I don't know if you're familiar with Rabbi Beryl Wein. He's probably the most famous Orthodox Jewish historian today. And he said that he wasn't always in the rabbinics. After he graduated from rabbinical school, he went off to law school, and he got himself a job working in a law office. And he said on the first day, Mamish fits into what you were saying, the first day that he was working, he was so completely absorbed in what he was doing that he forgot to daven mincha. And he said that for him was like the most incredible wake up. Like, How do you do it? I don't know. How do you do it? So fine, maybe it requires a little bit of self-sacrifice, and you have to take off a little bit from your precious lunch break, right, in order to be able to take care of davening mincha, so that you know that you've taken care of it and it's been done, because it's not so easy when you're working for somebody else to start asking for all kinds of religious things. It's hard enough as it is, right? There are people today who lose their jobs because they have to go home early on a Friday in the winter, and it's businesses aren't so crazy about these things. They're really not. They need you there.
That's why it says you should own your own business if possible, right? Doesn't it say that? Or?
It will say that.
I thought we talked about it. You said that the ideal situation is to own your own business, so you don't have a boss, so you could.
Oh, I mean, maybe. I mean, I don't remember saying that.
Maybe
It's interesting. I hope so. But because I don't remember saying not there's anything wrong with that. I'm not sure. It sounds like a very nice idea. It doesn't sound to me like something which is applicable to most people. Most people work for other people.
In New York, you have a lot of the WASPy companies today. You have people with minyanim.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's great. I remember when I was a kid growing up in England, in London. There was one business that had a minyan for mincha. That was like the famous place where all the Frum Jews were trying to get that stuff mincha in that business. It was owned by Frum Jews. Today, there are tens and tens of them all over the place. It's great, Baruch Hashem, it's great. But again, you've got to be able to do it. You've got to be able to break away and take off time and to go and pray. Not everybody's, crazy about that. I just remember when I was in school, I went to a non-Jewish school. My parents wanted me to have a decent, education, and then they gave me and my brothers. We had Rebbes in the afternoons after we came back from school that would learn with us, learn Jewish things with us. And the school that I went to had a lot of Jews in it. Bless you, it wasn't a Jewish school. It had a lot of Jews in it, and but there were only 3 of us that took off on Friday afternoons early, right, for Shabbat, to get home for Shabbat. And it was terrific because the first year that I did it, so I took in a note for my parents at the beginning of when they changed the clock with the winter. I took in a note for my parents asking me to be dismissed early on a Friday afternoon so that I could come home. And of course, it's a non-Jewish school, so they don't know that when the clocks change back to the summer that anything's changed. They don't know that. So in the summer, I was going home early also on Friday afternoon, which was great, absolutely great. My parents didn't know about it, and the school didn't know about it. And it was like that was the best year I had in school, I think, actually.
I don't know. I did the same thing, but it's one thing. Went to Catholic
Yeah.
school in Columbia.
I left school early. I didn't even have a note.
Ah,
Yeah,
the
but I
new
did-
generation, huh?
No, I did what you did.
I was homeschooled.
I didn't tell them to change.
What?
It's better if you're homeschooled.
It's better if you're homeschooled.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Well, I wouldn't have minded being homeschooled so long as my parents weren't home.
How long have you been feeling like that?
Oh, forever. Most of my education came from when I was home and my parents were away. Well, excuse me. You should be well. Emet Hashem. Anyway, Shasani Kotoki, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's given it's an interesting language. What does Sarki mean? Sarki means needs, right? As opposed to Ritzoni. We're not saying that God has given us everything that we want. We know that God hasn't given us everything that we want, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if God's given me everything that I need right now in order for me to be able to exist and succeed right now. Do I want a red Ferrari? Actually, I don't actually tell you the truth, but do I want a red Ferrari? Yeah, of course I want a red Ferrari, but that's not what Shasari Kotsarki means. Because if I needed to have a red Ferrari, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu would arrange that I should have one. Right? So they tell over a cute story about a chassid that comes into his Rebbe, and he says, Rebbe, I've got children, I have to marry off my children, I've got 5 daughters at home, and they're waiting for their shidduchim, I don't have any money. He says, I don't know how to get them married. So the Rebbe says, really? He says, that's terrible. He says, how much money do you need? So the fellow says, look, he says, I'm not I'm not a greedy person. He said $10 million should do it, I think. I hope. Right? I wouldn't take anything more, certainly not more than I need, for sure not, right? So the Rebbe says, okay, fine, leave it with me. I'll pray for you. It's going to be okay. As the chassid's walking out the door, the Rebbe calls him back and he says, just 1 minute. He says, come back here a second. He says, just tell me again, how much money do you need? If you were drowning in a river right now, how much money would you need? How much would you want me to pray for? So the chassid, looks at the Rebbe and he sort of opens his mouth and closes it a couple of times, like doing a fish impersonation. And then he says, well, Rebbe, that's not a fair question. So again, it's a cutesy story, right? But the moral of the story, I think, is very clear. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us everything that we need. Normally, we're so fixated on what we don't have that we don't even see what we've got, right? A person's well, and a person's got his health, and he's got his family, and a person's, huh?
I don't
What?
have my health.
I don't think that having a little runny nose counts as not having your health.
Actually, the cold, the symptoms is your body fighting off the infection. So the fact that
I
you
would
have
say
a cold means
anything that can be dealt with a piece of tissue, then you're okay.
My jacket disagrees.
It's a beautiful bracha.
It's the most incredible bracha. It really is. And it's a bracha but it requires you to say Rokaret Alamayim. You hear the idea? It requires you to recognize that God is keeping the whole world in existence. And if God's keeping the whole world in existence, so he's keeping me in existence as well. He's giving me whatever I need right now in order for me to be able to do whatever I need to do right now. It doesn't preclude, the beauty of the bracha, I don't know, part one of the beauties of the bracha is, it doesn't preclude wanting other things. It really doesn't. Right? You can want whatever you want, so long as you know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is giving you what you need right now. There's a beautiful story they tell that somebody once came to the Panovich Rav Kahneman, and he says to him, Rebbe, I daven that the sages say that you daven and God will listen. He says, I daven and I pray and I beseech, and God's not listening. I ask him for these things, I never get them. God's not listening. So the Panovich Rav turned to him and he said to him in Yiddish, he says he listened. He said no. Right? Very often we make the terrible mistake of imagining that if I'm finally praying to God, the very least he can do is give me everything I want. Like God is some kind of, grandfatherly Santa Claus-like figure, who's just gonna, just hold out your hand and he'll give it to you. Doesn't work like that.
Talking like about Rabbi Wine, he mentioned something along your lines. Like if somebody wants to commit suicide and he jumps, but he doesn't die. Because God's saying, not when you want to. Same thing.
It's pretty sad, huh?
What
It used
about
to
the
be
guy
a
who
capital
succeeds?
crime in England.
And God wanted him
Attempted
to die.
suicide used to be a capital crime.
Then, in that case, why is it
They
a crime to
punish
commit
people?
suicide?
That's something
Sorry?
else. That's,
Well, taking this joke a little too seriously, I asked, then what about the cases where somebody succeeds in dying when trying to commit suicide?
God wanted him to.
Yeah, and then my question became, then why is it a crime?
Taking your own life is a crime. If God wants somebody's life to come to an end, then that person's life will come to an end. No,
That's the whole idea of what I was saying.
it doesn't.
Yeah,
It doesn't require that person to take his own life.
yeah, but if the idea we're saying is that God can make it so that it's a failed suicide, then why does it matter whether or not he's attempting to do it, or it's some other person attempting to do it, or natural causes, or whatever?
Because what we're taught is like this: that human life is sacrosanct, and every moment that a person lives here in this physical world is a moment of potential eternity. And if a person chooses to end their own life, what they're doing is that they're taking away that potential.
Through free will, they're challenging God's sovereignty over who lives and who dies. That's why it's different than
Yeah,
natural causes.
but if we're saying that God can nevertheless make it a failed suicide or a successful suicide?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know what the criteria are, as far as God's concerned. Right? I don't know what the criteria are that why one person's suicide would be successful and another person's not. But if we're working on the premise that a person whose suicide has failed is because God's telling him, no, we're going to do this my way, not your way, right? I decide, not you. Then we have to work on the premise that when there is a successful suicide, it means that that person's lifespan came to an end over here in this physical world. But if he wouldn't have done what he did, it would have come to an end in a different way.
Then in that case, why does it matter if it's by his own hand?
Again, because human life in general is sacrosanct. It's not for you to decide when it's going to come to an end.
But it seems like it's God's making the decision. God is making the decision either way. So saying sacrosanct is just applying a sort of circular thing to it.
This boils down to how the paradox of how free will and divine providence can coexist. I think that's
Okay.
the issue here.
Is that?
Yeah.
Okay, is that?
Somebody
Oh,
decided to kill
oh,
themselves, but
that's
it was God's
No,
plan.
why-
the
that's
whole
easy,
time.
that's easy enough.
No, why I
The
brought it
Rambam
up-
says we don't understand it.
Why-
There you go.
Why I brought
Oh,
it up
that's a
is-
cheap thing. Always ask
Well, the
questions.
philosophers don't understand it.
Why I
Always
brought it
ask
up is
questions.
because of what the rabbi said about, I want the Ferrari. You want it, but God says no.
Well, clearly God's saying yes if you succeed.
That's something
Yeah.
else, but it's up to him. I mean, first of all, Rosh
Right.
Hashanah, Yom Kippur, we already assigned what's going to be.
You know, this Shabbos in Shul, it's something called Shabbos Mevorachim. Right, we're gonna bench. There's gonna be a new moon in Mitzvah Hashem. Next Shabbos is gonna be Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Right, so this Shabbos we're gonna bench inside the Shul. With a very, very beautiful prayers. If you have an opportunity to be in Shul, and you have the opportunity to follow along, read them through. They're very beautiful. And we're asking that the new month should be a good month. It should be a blessed month. It should be a month of all different kinds of blessings. And at the end, we ask God, Shimaleh Hashem Mishalot Libenu L'Tova, that we ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu to fulfill our heartfelt desires, but it should be L'Tova, for the good. Right? What's the idea? The idea is very simple. Again, prayer. There's an incredible dimension to prayer where it crystallizes obvious ideas and makes them very clear. Right? That we're saying like this. What are we saying to God? I know what I want, right? And I want a month that's going to have, at least 5 red Ferraris in it, right?
Okay.
But it should be Latova, which means if it's good for me to have that, then fine, give it to me. And if it's not good for me, then don't give it to me. In effect, what we're saying to God is, I know what I want, but I don't know what's good for me. I'm leaving that one up to you.
But how is this any different from, say, God doesn't want you to get the red Ferrari. You buy the red Ferrari, so God causes the red Ferrari to have the engine blow up or something like that. How is that any different?
Any different in what way?
Anyway.
It's not. I don't think it is different. I think what you're doing is that you're saying you're deciding that this is what you have to have, and you work. Even if you work very hard to get it, right?
Disregarding God.
But God doesn't want you to have it. The Gemara says that the path that a person wants to take, if you want it bad enough, then God will go along with you, even though it's not good for you.
Okay, but then why is one person punished for the suicide but not the Ferrari?
I mean, first of all, the reason that somebody, in general terms, the reason why somebody is punished because of the suicide and not for the Ferrari, ostensibly, obviously, is because we're told that we're not allowed to commit suicide. Mm-hmm. If it would say you're not allowed to buy a Ferrari, let's say there was a verse somewhere you could learn out that you're not allowed to buy whatever fancy cars, whatever it is, right? So then, for sure, the person's going against the Torah by buying that car. Mm-hmm. The person will only find out whether the Ferrari was the right thing to get or not when he gets upstairs at the age of 120, and then God's going to say to him, "Listen, I don't understand you. You were supposed to buy a Hyundai, right? And you went and you bought yourself a Ferrari instead." Right, and because of that, it took you off. It diverted you from what you were supposed to be doing down here in this physical world, and that it was a mistake. So fine, we'll find out what our mistakes are when we get upstairs. But things that we know that are forbidden, right? So for that, for sure, there's no questions. And that's really the only difference between the two, right? Pre knowledge and post knowledge, I guess.
Okay, that's fair.
It's a beautiful prayer for Shem Kippur.
Yeah, yeah.
through the whole-
It's very poignant. I tell you a funny story. When I was a kid, so there was a hotel in Rimini, which is where is Rimini? In Italy, right? Which is it in Italy? I think it's in Italy. I can't remember. I think so. And it had
Never heard of Rimini.
yeah. You've probably never heard of Italy either. You're from America. It's like it's a place called Europe. Don't worry about it. You go down Ocean Parkway, right, and you make a left at the end. Don't worry. It's
Get
not.
the belt.
You know, I read the most incredible statistic. 80% of Americans don't have passports.
I can believe
Right?
that.
Why? Because America is a self-contained country. You got everything. You want to go skiing, you go there. You want to go beaching, you go there. Right? You want to everything. What do you need to leave for? Unless you want to come to Israel. So this hotel, I remember it. I can't remember. I don't remember what it was called. It was on like at the top of a hill, and it was a kosher hotel, and in the summers it was kosher anyway. And on the way out, when you went down to go into the town or to go to anywhere, you had to walk past a Lamborghini showroom. And our Lamborghinis, only one person actually lifted up his eyebrows over here. Lamborghinis are, they put Ferraris into your back pocket. You know, Lamborghinis are even more expensive. And every time we would walk past, my father would stop. We had to stop outside this showroom, and he would like a little kid, you know, he'd like peer inside and look, and probably squish his nose against the glass or something. And there was a car. It was a Lamborghini. It had gull's wings, which is the doors opened up instead of out. I can't remember what it was. It was called a Lamborghini Countach or something. Something that I don't remember. It had a fancy name. And you know, my father would drool. He'd look at this car and he would drool every single day, going out and coming back. This was like davening, you know, davening twice a day, you know, davening to the God of Lamborghini. And anyway, one day I remember I was a little kid, but I remember he turns to my mother and he says, "That's it." He says, "I'm selling the kids and I'm buying this car." So my mother, always being the practical one in the family, she looks at my father, who was like, he was a little bit round, my father. And she says to him, "Okay," she says, "whatever you say," she says, "but just tell me," she says, let's imagine for a moment you can get into this thing. How are you going to get out?" So he was like, "Oh, okay, so let's go back and have dinner, okay."
It's a funny story of how Lamborghini started. Like, apparently, like, Lamborghini and Ferrari were two, like, mechanics in Italy, and they had these, like, terrible arguments and disagreements, and it was, like, all... Lamborghini was started out of spite.
Oh, really?
It was all Machlekes.
It was...
Like
It was, like, a company that was actually started to spite somebody else.
Somebody
Good. Okay, we're gonna stop over here. Mitzvah Hashem. We should just remember that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when you go to shul on Shabbos morning and you daven those tefillahs, that we should have a good month. So keep in mind, right? HaKadosh Baruch Hu is listening to everything you say. He doesn't always give you what you want. That's okay, right? And in Mitzvah Hashem, we'll meet up over here again on Sunday. Tomorrow's the best day of the week because I don't have to come in. And we'll meet up again on Sunday, bleary-eyed and hungover, right? Wishing to be anywhere else but here. Yeah. Good. Everyone should have a wonderful Shabbos in Mitzvah Hashem.
Thank you.